At 200 feet below the surface, Marcus Chen found a body wedged in an underwater pipeline. He recognized the diver, Viktor Petrov. But Viktor was supposed to be alive topside, 2 days evacuated. When Marcus reached out to check the corpse, its eyes opened. 145 feet down in the blue hole, Sienna Rodriguez passed through the thermocline and discovered something waiting below. Beings that used to be divers, and when they touched her, they left burns on her skin. These are 2 true deep-sea diving horror stories, and both divers are still being hunted. My name, in my own voice, calling from 200 feet down. The surface was gone, replaced by something else. They moved wrong, joints bending in extra directions. Story 1, 200 feet down. The corpse's eyes opened, milky, fixed, staring straight through the faceplate at me like it had been waiting for my light to find it. I was hovering at 200 feet in the North Sea, floodlights cutting a narrow tunnel through black water. My breath loud inside the helmet, every inhale dragging against the pressure. The body was wedged into the pipeline junction like it had been placed there on purpose. And the name on the suit hit me like a punch, Viktor Petrov. That made no sense. Viktor had been evacuated topside 48 hours earlier. I watched him get pulled out through the saturation system myself. Yet here he was, impossibly fresh, no bloating, no drifting slack, just pinned in place as if the ocean was holding him up for me to see. I reached for his wrist computer because divers do that. We look for numbers when reality stops making sense. But the moment my glove brushed his arm, his jaw moved behind the regulator, slow and deliberate, like he was trying to speak around a mouthful of seawater. Then he smiled, not a normal smile, too wide, too patient, and behind him, in the edge of my light, shapes began to rise from the darkness below. Let me back up, because what happened next changed everything I believed about deep water. 3 days earlier, the job had been routine. Inspect the pipeline junction, confirm integrity, photograph some corrosion, come back up. Commercial saturation work is ugly, mechanical, repetitive. Long shifts living inside a steel chamber, breathing helium until your voice turns thin and wrong, then dropping into the sea like a tool being lowered from a crane. The only comfort is procedure. The only safety is predictability. But Viktor broke that rhythm. He'd been the calm one, the veteran who joked through comms and never rushed a task until he demanded emergency extraction. When they brought him into the chamber lock, his face looked drained, like he'd aged years in a single dive. He wouldn't say what happened. He just kept staring through the porthole at the surface light shimmering above us, whispering, "They're still down there, waiting." Everyone chalked it up to stress, nitrogen fatigue, anything that fit inside a report. I tried to believe that too. On my descent, everything felt normal for the first minute. Cold biting at my suit, tether line tugging gently, Julie's voice in my headset keeping time with check-ins. Depth, 120. Depth, 160. My floodlights picked out drifting snow of particles, nothing more. Then at 180 feet, my instruments started lying. Depth flickered, 200, 187, 234, back to 200. Temperature dipped too fast, too sharp, like something colder than the ocean itself had brushed the sensors. Julie asked if I was stressed because my oxygen consumption spiked, and I almost laughed, until I realized my breathing had gotten faster without my permission, like my body sensed something my eyes hadn't seen yet. The pipeline junction emerged, ahead a hulking cross of steel and bolts, and the moment my light fell across it, my stomach dropped. Scratches, not corrosion, not impact. Deep grooves carved in sets of 5, too evenly spaced, too deliberate, like fingers had raked the metal again and again until it gave up. I put my gloved hand near one groove and it looked wrong. Too big, too long. Then the ocean moved, A silt cloud rolled in as if the seafloor had been kicked up by something massive, yet there was no current down there. No reason for the bottom to bloom into blindness. Visibility collapsed to a few feet. My light became a flashlight in fog. In that haze, I saw a fresh handprint pressed into the silt on the pipeline casing, sharp edges, clean lines as if someone had touched it seconds ago. But the glove print pattern didn't match any modern dive glove, and the fabric fragments caught in the grooves looked rotted, ancient, like they'd been underwater for decades. A scraping sound shuddered through the water, metal on metal, loud enough that I felt it in my teeth through the helmet. Julie's voice came through again, but it warped mid-sentence, dragging out syllables like a tape being stretched. She said my camera feed showed I wasn't moving even though my position was drifting. I told her I was holding steady, except I wasn't drifting. Something else was. Something close enough to disturb instruments without ever touching me. A pale shape slipped past the edge of my floodlights, too fast to focus on, but long enough to leave an afterimage in my mind. I spun, searching, tether line tightening as if it wanted to pull me away from whatever was down there. That's when I saw the pipeline junction opening, the shadowed gap where sections met, and something inside it looked like a human form folded wrong, like a mannequin shoved into a pipe. I moved closer because procedure says confirm, document, assess. My light found the suit markings. Victor. My throat went dry inside the helmet. I remember thinking, if this is Victor, then who did we extract? And then his eyes opened. Everything after that happened in pieces. Snapshots burned into the brain by adrenaline. Victor's head turning in slow, impossible increments, the smile widening as if the faceplate didn't limit it. A gentle tug on my tether, not from above but from behind, like a hand testing a leash. Julie speaking into my headset, but her tone wrong. Too calm, too intimate, telling me to descend farther to check the lower junction to go to 240 feet. The words didn't sound like instructions, they sounded like an invitation. I backed away, and Victor's body didn't float or sway like a dead weight should. It unfolded, joints bending the wrong direction, limbs extending with a stiff patience, as if something inside the suit was learning how to wear it. Behind him, more pale silhouettes rose from below in a vertical line like divers ascending. Except they had no bubbles, no gear lights, no tethers, and they moved with the same synchronized, unnatural economy. Panic underwater is lethal. It steals oxygen, it makes you stupid. But terror also clarifies priorities, and mine narrowed to a single decision. The bends, or whatever those were. I triggered emergency ascent and let the tether pull, cutting away from the junction as fast as the line would allow. My chest hurt from breathing too hard against the regulator. My vision tunneled. When I looked down one last time, the pale shapes didn't chase me. They only watched, motionless, as if they already knew something I didn't, that I wasn't really escaping. I hit the surface too fast. Pain lit up my joints like someone was driving nails into my elbows and knees. Hands dragged me onto the deck. Voices shouted, and the sky seemed wrong, too bright, too far away. They shoved me into the recompression chamber and sealed the hatch, and I lay there listening to my own ragged breaths echoing in steel. Through the chamber porthole, I saw the deck blurred by rain and spray, and then I saw him. A figure standing alone by the rail, dripping wet, no suit, no helmet, just a human shape turned toward me. He raised a hand and waved slowly, the same deliberate motion Victor used when he joked at the end of a shift. I tried to sit up, to point, to scream, but my tongue felt too big in my mouth. The medic looked where I looked and saw nothing. They told me it was decompression sickness, narcosis, shock, pick a label, any label, as long as it fit on paper. The official inspection found no body in the pipeline, no fresh scratches beyond normal wear, no anomalous readings, nothing that could embarrass the company. But my dive computer told a different story. 6 hours and 47 minutes at depth. Topside logs insisted I'd been down for 43 minutes. Nearly 4 hours of my life simply didn't exist in their timeline. For a long time, that was the worst part. Not the eyes, not the smile, not the shapes rising in the dark. Just the blank space where memory should be, like something had reached into my mind and removed the middle of the story. I quit deep work after that, sold most of my gear, packed my old dive radio into storage, and tried to rebuild a life on land where the floor doesn't fall away into endless black. It almost worked. Until one night years later I heard it, static crawling out of a box that wasn't even plugged in, followed by slow breathing on an emergency channel that shouldn't have been active. I froze because the breathing was steady, regulated, intimate, like it was inside a helmet. Then a voice came through, low and wet and familiar, and it said my name in my own voice, stretched thin by interference. The transmission cut out, came back, and the voice whispered again, closer this time, like the ocean had learned the distance to my house. And in the silence after, I understood what Victor meant. They weren't just waiting down there, they were practicing. Unable to fetch new external sources, in this turn to cite formatting, JAWS, retention guidance. The story above is original narrative and does not rely on tool-derived claims. Story 2. The Thermocline. The surface was gone, not too far to reach, not hard to see through bubbles and panic, gone like someone had erased the bright ceiling of the ocean and replaced it with the same thick, glowing blue in every direction. I was 145 feet down in the blue hole Belize on a single breath, legs burning from the turn, and the rope line that should have been my highway home was drifting off to the side like it didn't belong to my world anymore. My lungs screamed for air, but the first thing that hit me wasn't suffocation. It was the cold realization that I couldn't tell which way was up. A pale figure hovered 10 feet away, just beyond where my vision started to blur at the edges. It looked human, the way a bad memory looks human. Translucent skin, a face that kept changing shape depending on how the bioluminescent shimmer moved across it. Barnacle-like crusts scattered along the shoulders and ribs as if the ocean had started building a reef on a living body. It raised its hand. I raised mine instinctively, and that's when I realized it wasn't copying me. I was copying it, like my body had fallen into step with something older and calmer and far more in control. Then the figure drifted forward and touched my forearm, and pain erupted under my wetsuit, hot and electric, like a fistful of jellyfish stings pressed into one perfect handprint. But what happened next changed everything. The burning didn't spread randomly. It formed lines, deliberate strokes, as if the pain itself was writing. I should explain how I ended up in water that didn't behave like water. My name is Sienna Rodriguez, and free diving was the only time my mind ever went quiet. No tanks, no bubbles, no engine hum. Just breath and discipline and the long, clean silence beneath the boat. I'd been training for months to push past my personal record. Filming dives for my marine bio thesis, mapping the blue hole's familiar contours the way some people memorize city streets. Tyler, my boyfriend and safety diver, sat above on the boat with a stopwatch and a float line, watching my descent like it was an equation that always ended in me coming back smiling. That morning, everything felt perfect. Warm surface water, calm sea, sunlight like shattered glass on the waves. I did my breathing cycle, felt my heart rate fall, then slipped below and let the rope guide me down through layers of blue that darkened like a dimmer switch being turned. At 80 feet, I felt weightless. At 120 feet, the world narrowed to the line in my own pulse. And at 130 feet, I hit the thermocline, the boundary where warm surface water gives up to the cold deep. You can feel it like a wall. You can see it like a shimmer. I'd crossed it before a dozen times, except this time, when my fingertips broke through, the water below wasn't colder. It was warmer. wrongly warm like bathwater poured into a grave. I kept descending because ambition is a quiet form of self-destruction. My depth computer blinked, 140, 145. I reached my target. I should have turned. I did turn. But the moment I kicked upward, the thermocline above me disappeared as if someone had pulled a curtain away and left only endless stage lights. The rope line wasn't vertical anymore. It angled into the distance, drifting as if the surface had shifted and the boat had moved miles away without making a sound. I told myself it was disorientation, the kind that happens when your brain runs low on oxygen and starts bargaining with reality. Then I saw the caves. The blue hole has caves. That's not unusual. What was unusual was the one opening that hadn't been there on my last dive. A narrow mouth in the limestone wall, black around the edges but lit inside by faint bluish pulses like something breathing light. A silhouette stood in that opening and watched me with the stillness of something that doesn't need air. I kicked harder. My chest tightened. I tried to follow my bubbles, except I had no bubbles. I tried to follow the rope, except the rope now led toward the cave, not away from it, and my hand slipped along it like it wanted to pull me there. The first figure wasn't alone. As I spun, more shapes drifted out from the dark. 2, then 3, then too many to count because my vision kept tunneling. They moved like divers who'd forgotten they were human. No frantic kicking, no wasted motion, just gliding corrections and gentle turns. Each one was half-formed, as if the ocean had started rebuilding them from the inside out, skin thin as film, eyes too reflective, mouths that didn't open but somehow suggested smiling. Something dangled from one of them, a shredded strip of neoprene, and my brain grabbed onto it like a lifeline. My name, faded but readable, stitched on a panel I recognized. Rodriguez. My old wetsuit, lost here months ago after a fin strap broke and I'd had to ditch gear to surface safely. Seeing it down here felt like seeing a photograph of yourself pinned to a crime scene wall. But what happened next changed everything. The figure holding the strip didn't present it like a trophy. It held it out like proof, like a receipt. Like it was telling me I'd already been here, already been taken, and I just didn't remember the part where I stayed. The burning handprint on my arm intensified and the pain sharpened into shapes. Not random welts, letters, crude angry lines pressed through nerve endings. I couldn't read it at first because my eyes watered and my brain was counting seconds until blackout. Then the message clarified in the only way pain can. Stay. The word felt less like instruction and more like gravity. The figures drew closer, surrounding me without touching again. Their bodies faintly luminous, their movements synchronized with my panic as if they could taste my oxygen and knew exactly when it would run out. My mouth opened involuntarily, wasting air I didn't have, and I tried to scream underwater. A stupid, silent reflex. In that moment, I saw the worst detail. Their wrists. Each one wore something on the wrist like a dive computer or a watch. Rusted, crusted, but recognizable as human equipment. Like they'd once measured time, too. Like they'd once promised themselves they'd surface before the numbers ran out. I kicked upward with everything left in me, not trusting direction, just committing to the idea that up had to exist somewhere. My vision narrowed to a bright oval that might have been the surface or might have been my brain shutting down. Then as suddenly as it vanished, the thermocline returned above me, its shimmering boundary snapping into place like a door locking behind my back. Cold water slapped my face. The world made sense again for half a second, and I broke the real surface, coughing air so violently it felt like my lungs might tear. Tyler hauled me over the side, shouting my name, asking what happened, telling me I'd been down 8 minutes. 8. That number was impossible. My dive profile should have killed me or at least left me shaking with narcosis. But my body didn't feel like it had survived something impossible. It felt like it had been allowed to leave. The burn on my arm stayed. A clean handprint, finger marks too long, the skin raised and blistered in lines that still hinted at letters even after the pain dulled. When we reviewed my GoPro footage on the boat, Tyler went quiet. The camera showed me descending, turning, and then nothing. No glowing water, no cave mouth, no pale figures. Just empty blue, me swimming in circles, reaching out like I was touching invisible walls, jerking my arm away from something that wasn't there. It made me look insane. It made me look like a liar. But the burns were real. The missing thermocline was real. The warmth below 130 feet was real. And what happened next changed everything in a way I can't explain. 3 days later, while I was still in the hospital getting checked for nerve damage, Tyler shoved his phone in my face and asked why I'd been diving again. On the screen was my account, my name, my profile photo, my followers, posting a new clip titled like one of my training logs, Blue Hole, 2:10 FT, timestamped 3:47 a.m. The attached video played shaky, dark footage from deep water. The camera angled upward as if someone had set it down on the seafloor to film the ceiling. In the frame, pale silhouettes floated just out of focus like moths around a porch light. Then the camera tilted slowly, smoothly, too smoothly for current, and pointed at something that stole the air from my lungs all over again. The outside of my hospital room window at night, rain streaking the glass, my silhouette sitting upright in bed. The perspective was wrong. The angle was wrong. It was as if the ocean itself had risen to the second floor and pressed a lens against the pane. A pale hand drifted into frame and tapped the window once, gently, like a polite knock. Then the video ended and my phone buzzed with a new notification, another upload scheduled for the next night. Deeper. No external sources were accessed in this turn. The paragraph is original narrative,